So what we read outside was Luke 19, where they call Jesus a king who comes in the name of the Lord. And here we have Luke 23, just a few chapters later. Then the assembly rose as a body and brought Jesus before Pilate. They began to accuse him, saying, "We found this man perverting our nation, forbidding us to pay taxes to the emperor, and saying that he himself is the Messiah, a king." Then Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" He answered, "You say so." Then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, "I find no basis for an accusation against this man." But they were insistent and said, "He stirs up the people by teaching throughout all Judea, from Galilee where he began, even to this place." When Pilate heard this, he asked whether the man was a Galilean. And when he heard that he was under Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him off to Herod, who was himself in Jerusalem at that time. When Herod saw Jesus, he was very glad, for he had been wanting to see him for a long time, because he'd heard about him and was hoping to see him perform some sign. He questioned him at some length, but Jesus gave him no answer. The chief priests and the scribes stood by vehemently, accusing him. Even Herod, with his soldiers, treated him with contempt and mocked him. Then he put an elegant robe on him and sent him back to Pilate. That same day, Herod and Pilate became friends with each other. Before this, they had been enemies. Pilate then called together the chief priests, the leaders, and the people, and said to them, "You brought me this man as one who was perverting the people, and here I have examined him in your presence and have not found this man guilty of any of your charges against him. Neither has Herod, for he sent him back to us. Indeed, he has done nothing to deserve death. I will therefore have him flogged and release him." Then they all shouted together, "Away with this fellow! Release Barabbas for us!" This was a man who had been put in prison for an insurrection that had taken place in the city and for murder. Pilate, wanting to release Jesus, addressed them again. But they kept shouting, "Crucify him!" A third time he said to them, "Why, what evil has he done? I have found in him no ground for the sentence of death. I will therefore have him flogged and then release him." But they kept urgently demanding with loud shouts that he should be crucified, and their voices prevailed. So Pilate gave his verdict that their demand should be granted. He released the man they asked for, the one who had been put in prison for insurrection and murder, and he handed Jesus over as they wished. This is the gospel of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may Grace and peace to you from God, our Creator, Jesus, our Redeemer, and the Holy Spirit who sustains us. Amen. Today is Palm Sunday, but we do Palm Passion Sunday here at Christ the King. Not all churches do that, but we really want to talk about the Passion because if folks don't make it to Maundy Thursday or Good Friday, they miss a huge part of the story, and you go from Palm Sunday to Easter, right, with no cross in between. So we kind of toe that line of both today. And so we start with the story from Luke 19, the story of the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. Jesus knows he's going to Jerusalem to die, and yet he still goes there. And the people say these words, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest heaven." This is Luke's version. There's actually no palms and no Hosanna in Luke's version. But these are the words we get. They call him a king. Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. He rides in on a donkey. They spread their cloaks for him to make a path. And Jesus enters. We think of this as a celebratory procession into Jerusalem, right? But the more I've been thinking about this week, the more I wonder, is this a procession or is this a protest? The way that Jesus shows up in this story looks to me a lot like a protest. The way that he enters this city where Pilate would have entered for the festival of Passover just days or hours ahead of him from a different way, riding in on a horse surrounded by a military caravan, right? Surrounded by instruments and drums and a real procession into the city. And then the way that Jesus enters is kind of like making fun of that. It's kind of comedy almost how opposite it is. To enter on a donkey, on a colt, with cloaks, with the lowliest of people instead of soldiers, to be called a king in the city where the rulers are coming to stoke fear and make sure that these Jewish people celebrating their holiday know who's really in charge. They know that Rome is watching how they celebrate. Rome is watching what they do. And Jesus enters in this way. It looks a lot like a protest, a lot like a subversive act. And that's what Luke's gospel has been all about. Jesus' ministry is subversive. It flips things on its head throughout Luke's gospel. This is Jesus' first words in his hometown temple in Luke's gospel, Luke 4, when he says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." Luke's gospel is all about flipping things on its head. Before this, we have Mary's song, the Magnificat, her subversive song. And Jesus is all about proclaiming release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free. And this is what he is speaking, this is what he is acting out in this protest, in this procession, in the face of Rome, in the face of empire. And he's accused. The fingers go from praising to pointing to accusing. And these are the things that he's accused of. And the leaders make sure that they put these accusations in language that Rome would be worried about, right? They're not saying he's doing these rituals different. He's not honoring the Sabbath, right? Rome doesn't care about that. Rome cares about perverting our nation, about disturbing the Roman peace, the Pax Romana, they say he's telling us to not pay our taxes, which we know isn't true because he says, render to Caesar what is Caesar's, right? That's not true, but they know that will get, or they think that will get the Roman leaders angry. And then they say he's claiming to be king. He's claiming to be the Messiah, the chosen one of God. Caesar, the emperor, is supposed to be the Son of God, right? Throughout Luke's gospel, Jesus is given the title Son of God, which was a title only given to Caesar, only given to the emperor. And so that is so subversive, and it's in the face of empire to claim to be king, to claim to be the Son of God, because that was a title reserved for emperor. And then this is the one that's really stood out to me this time around. He stirs the people up by teaching. He stirs the people up by teaching. Teaching a different way, teaching them that empire is not the only way, teaching them that power does not come from the top down, but from the people entering the city in this way. Teaching a different way, teaching the way of life instead of the way of domination. But even though these are the accusations against him, the leaders, they still don't buy it. I love this telling of the story because Pilate triangulates Herod in this story. Pilate's like, I don't want to deal with this. Let me call Herod. He's a Galilean, so let me get Herod involved. And a powerful man, if he can take credit for killing a criminal, he's going to do it. But he doesn't think that Jesus is guilty, so he doesn't want that credit. He actually brings someone else into the fold. He triangulates Herod, and then Herod is just excited to see Jesus because he's heard about all the things he's done, and he hopes he'll do a miracle. And they both find him innocent. They both say, indeed, he has done nothing to deserve death. They offer to flog him just to make the crowds happy and release him, but the crowds will not be happy with that. The crowds shout, crucify him. The same people, the same crowds that were saying, blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord, the same crowds that were saying, Hosanna, they turn their tone and they shout, crucify him. Their loud shouts, their voices prevailed. How often are the loudest voices the voices of death and hate? The loudest voices were shouting, "Crucify him." And I keep coming back to that accusation that he's been teaching, right? He's been teaching a different way. And the crowds would rather choose death than be taught a different way. The people would rather kill than change their ways, than change what they're comfortable with, than change the comfort of empire. On this, I'm just really stuck on this year. They would rather kill than change. That makes me think of what Putin is doing. He feels the pressure of the West pushing in. And instead of change, instead of the West, instead of that, what that means for his country, he would rather kill. He would rather torture. He would rather murder. I think of all of these anti-LGBTQ legislation in our country right now. Instead of trying to understand why someone is trans or non-binary and how to love those people, we would rather choose death. We would rather risk them killing themselves, which is what we know people do if they're in the LGBTQ community and they don't have support, than change, than learn, than be taught. Then I think about our climate. We would rather choose the death of our climate, of our world, than change our ways, than inconvenience ourselves of caring for creation and calling out corporations that don't care for creation. We'd rather choose death than change, than imagine a new way. But that's what Jesus does. That's what Jesus calls us to, a new way. Jesus shows us a new way. Jesus shows us what it looks like to choose love, to choose community over death. Jesus shows us that kings don't have to be people who kill, who choose dominion. Kings can be kings through their vulnerability. Kings can be kings through meeting people on the margins. Leaders don't have to choose dominion. Jesus shows us a new way. And that's why we tell this story, so that history doesn't repeat itself time and time again. Because we tell the story because we need God. We tell the story because so easily we fall into the crowds who have forgotten to point to God and are starting to point at one another with accusations. We tell this story because we often forget that the loudest voices don't have to be the voices of hate, that we can speak up and we can be loud voices of love, and love can prevail. We tell this story because even if we don't do all of those things, even if we end up shouting, "Crucify him," which we do sometimes, we know that God brings life out of death even still. We tell this story because we know where we're going. We tell this story because we know where it ends. Amen.